Okay, I'm going to attempt a video manual for the El Pescadoro Reverberant Hot Pre. This pedal is pretty much, if not exactly, a junior barnyard hot preamp. So the controls on this pedal are all on here. They're just arranged differently. True bypass, your bass guitar switch, your woolly bright switch, your woolly bright switch, your grits and chitlin switch was just turned into a toggle instead of a stomp. The only thing that's not on here but inside is the pre-boost gain pot. That's been put on a little trim pot on the circuit board. When you open up the back of the pedal, you'll see it. It's a little blue trim pot. There's actually just a Sharpie mark where I set it to how I have my own setup. And so they're all just kind of tuned to my ear. Not that my ear is anything special, but kind of base everything I build on my ears. So that's where it's at. It's obviously adjustable for your own ears and how you want to set it. So moving over to the reverb section, you have the wet mix, wet dry, and even at at full wet, you'll notice the original signal disappearing right here in this range. Smoke is a fancy word for the upper treble control of the actual wet reverb signal. And I found it really usable, especially when you're trying to grab those vintage chess record recorded sounds or ambient or reflective sounds that you hear on the album. Because obviously this reverb was not based on any specific product that was made back in the 50s. And of course this reverb is totally pre-Leo Fender and Spring Reverb, Premier Reverb. So what we took for the processing engine in this pedal, we focused on plates, echo, and chamber to create the sounds that you hear on the albums that were produced by Leonard Chess. And you can look up on my website. You'll see that I've spoken about how he put a mic in a drain pipe and fed that down to the basement. You listen to old Chuck Berry albums, Caroline and such, and you're hearing, Mr. Chess mixing in the reflective sounds of that basement chamber into the mix of the recording, as well as the room that the amplifier was in at the time. And so you're getting a mix of all that stuff, but that's where I was going with this. And even more so, I haven't said a whole lot about it. I love the Texas Playboys, and obviously this Junior Barnyard pedal was meant to get the sounds mostly of Junior Bernard and Eldon Shamblin in the Texas Playboys recordings, particularly the Tiffany recordings that were done supposedly in a basement studio at the bottom of a San Francisco hotel. So with that in mind, I wanted to add a reverb so the guitarist, could dial in his amplifier to quickly take, like the guitar that I'm using here, a Gretsch with very bright Filtertrine pickups, bright guitar into your average amp. This amp is pretty much a 63 Bassman with a Gibson octal tube front end, so I don't know, it's kind of like a warm Fender Deluxe if a Fender Deluxe had 6 L6s and more headroom. But anyway, controls as we were going on here, smoke control. I shared what that was. The dwell control is obviously your wet reverb mix or the reflection time, and that's pretty much it for that. It has its own little preamp sitting in the front end, and so there is a really tiny trim pot for that volume control. Again, I've set that so that it's just like a tiny bit above unity gain, just so it pops out in the mix when you turn it on. It can be, you know, raised up significantly and then drop back just a tiny bit. I don't have it really up very high. It's barely above unity gain, especially because it was meant to be used with this preamp on. I was going to just have one button, but I figured, oh well, let's allow the user to make that choice. So, let's just kind of go through these settings. Let's turn the pedal on the preamp. So I've just got it set bright. Pretty much everything's opened up as just kind of a clear preamp. And so sitting up here at 12 o'clock, it starts pushing on my amplifier. But the tone, if I go like a G chord and pick really lightly, it's not really affecting the color of the instrument at all. If I dig in, you know, it starts pushing on the amplifier. All right, so dry guitar, affected guitar. So I'm going to turn on the grits, which is the pre-boost mode, which immediately starts bringing in overdrive flavors, texture to the sound based on your pick attack. You know, I mean, so here's my guitar. You strum really light, and it stays clean. It's dynamic. Or I can dig in, and it starts overdriving. It's fairly bright that way. So if I put on my woolly switch, it's going to cut some of that high end, and it's going to add a little bit more clipping, which you could say is woolly, reedy, burly. It's supposed to garner that octal tube character sound. I'm going to turn it off. Here's the dry guitar. Turn it back on. Now I've got the bass on. That's really opening up the range. I've opened it up all the way so that if you have an upright bass, or you have, I don't know, a Fender Rhodes or steel guitar, and you need a wider sonic spectrum, this is going to just let it all in. And I find that even with a guitar, especially a hollow body or like, you know, big bobbin pickups, with this bass mode on, it kind of gets even woollier. The guitar range is, you know, just a classic range of a guitar, but you can definitely hear the difference between that in the bass section. So maybe one could say even a little bit more gain is added when that happens. That's not intended, because this switch is literally flipping between two different really nice capacitors. One is a polyester film for the guitar, old Panasonic style, and this one is a metal film. And I wanted to just open up the low end as much as I possibly could, like I said, for other instruments. And I've already explained what's going on with the woolly and bright switch. The grits mode, I told you, is a pre-boost, and it's changing the impedance of the way that it is receiving the instrument that's being put into it, and that's what starts pushing on it and acting just like, you know, you would with an octal tube amp. As you turn it up and you turn the volume controls on those old amplifiers, you get that response from it. So anyway, I'm going to go to bright mode, back to just a basic clean response. I'm going to turn on the reverb. So I'm going to put all my controls around 10 o'clock in the shallow mode. And what's happening between shallow and subterranean is you've got a plate and you've got a chamber or room, and then the lines are crossed in the programming of it. So in the Subterranean, it's a harder, brighter, reflective sound. Think tile, you know, a tile cement room. While the Shallows is going to have a warmer, richer sound, and you know, I don't know, linoleum floors, wood panel walls, popcorn ceiling, asbestos ceiling from the 50s. Try to see it that way. And I hear the biggest difference between the two when they're set fairly minimal, because the point was just to kind of grab the room sound. And see, for me, that's even too bright. So if I turn the smoke back, bring it back up to 10, and then fully open, the reflectivity becomes very bright. And then with the reverb wet and dry mix, take it almost to that point where the guitar comes back into the signal. In the Subterranean mode, you want to bring up the reflectivity just a little bit. And there's not much more to it, just simple controls. Wasn't really my intent or focus, but you can get really, really wet, crazy luchador of the 7 Seas sounds. Not sure what that is. You can figure that out. But it's a lot of fun. Or you can completely remove the guitar, or almost remove the guitar. Yeah, whatever. Who cares about that? This is where it's at, kids. This is where it's at. So there it is. If you have any questions, let me know.